Hello and welcome to the Bookstack Coffee Chat. It is another Thursday, so welcome back. As you know from last episode, we are now doing these every other week. So thank you for joining me on the new schedule. Be sure to pop in on the chat and let me know where you're viewing from. Let me know what you're reading. I am always looking to add things to my to be read list, that TBR list. So today, I've been having a few little tech challenges. I'm not sure if that's because the remnants of hurricane, now tropical storm Elsa, are moving through, or if it's just one of those random things. So hopefully this goes on without being cut off. Today, I am sharing about 3 different books that address fame and fear in 3 very different ways. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is the book The Broken Spine by Dorothy St. James. And so this one, sorry for the little reflection there, I believe it's part of a series, and it's a brand new book, came out just this year. And this one is a cozy mystery, so it's much more lighthearted. Obviously not the fact that one person is murdered, but it is lighthearted in everything else surrounding it. There's a lot of humor involved, a lot of seriousness too, but it's not one that's going to be a heavy read. It's all about, I'll read a little bit of the blurb here. A small town assistant librarian discovers that protecting the printed word is harder than she'd ever imagined. So the main character, Trudell, who's called True, Beckett, is the assistant librarian, and she and the main librarian are just so disheartened when the mayor and town manager decide that they're going to turn the treasured library that has been in existence for decades into a bookless technology center. So all the e-readers, the computers, audiobooks, but no real printed books. So True takes it upon herself to build a secret library in the basement. And everything that transpires makes her the prime suspect of the murder of the town manager, who dies when a DVD bookcase falls on him. So there's a lot of interesting twists and turns in the book, weaves in some literary humor as well, and just the names of characters. Even the cat that becomes one of her characters is named Dewey Decimal, which I love. So, but yeah, so the mayor and the town manager are seeking fame. They want to be the Silicon Valley of the South through this technology-driven library, and be the first library in the country to do this, right? And so they'll go to any lengths, as you discover in the book, to accomplish their goal, to be famous, which in turn leads to mayhem and fear for those around them. Those people in the town are left fearful. What happened? Who did it? Is it going to happen again? That kind of thing. So it's a very interesting and entertaining read. I look forward to reading the next book. As I said, I believe this is a series. So well done, Dorothy. Thank you for writing that. Another book, the second book that I'm going to share, is very different. It's nonfiction, biographical in nature, and it is Fly Girls by Keith O'Brien. I don't know if you can see that there. Keith O'Brien, get his name in there. And the subtitle is How 5 Daring Women Defied All Odds and Made Aviation History. So I don't know about you, but I only remember hearing about Amelia Earhart. I did not realize all of the other women who were involved. Obviously, I knew subconsciously that there had to be other women, right? But she was the only one that I remember making headlines, but she wasn't. And he focuses on these 5, but he mentions several other female flyers. and discusses the successes and challenges of many of the male pilots at the time too. And this took place in the mid 1920s through the mid to late 1930s is when this book takes place. And it is very vivid in its details. Some biographical texts are very dry and, event and date driven. What a lot of people consider, textbook, school book type books. But Keith O'Brien does a fantastic job of bringing out the personalities of each of the characters, men and women, that he shares in the story. And he also weaves the history of the air races that were going on at the time to drive public interest in flying. And I also didn't realize that, passenger airlines were occurring that early as well. I, for whatever reason, was thinking it was post-World War II, but it was pre-World War II. United Airlines was in the 1930s. So just very, very fascinating, all of the history that he brings to life, as well as the drive and the fears that they had. Now, some of the men and women were after fame. They wanted to be the fastest, or the first to accomplish certain destinations. And the things that drove them, he gets very detailed in that. It's very interesting. But their quest for fame, for all of them really, whether they want to be famous internationally or not, that drive to accomplish new things and be the first, I would consider that fame. Also led to a lot of fears. And, when you're flying in a plane, you have to overcome your fear of, crashing. And so that was a very real reality. And he's very honest and blunt about all the crashes and deaths that occurred during this time. And yet it didn't stop the people from pursuing those passions, the drive that they had to accomplish their goals, and for the women especially, to be able to compete in the races that had previously been male dominated and only open to men, as well as creating opportunities for them to fly around the world. So as I said, it mentions about the history of the races, like the Bendix race. I'd heard of Bendix races before, but got the background and the history of that. There were a couple of small passages that I was going to share. Oh, yes, about the history also of air marking. I had never heard of that term. Any of you know what air marking was? Very practical and beneficial, and saved many people's lives, actually, later in life. But air marking pilots, I'm quoting here, helped to prevent getting lost flying across the country in bad weather by identifying barns or factories with roofs at least 100 feet long and 20 feet wide, on which the government could paint large letters spelling out the name of the nearest town to help confused aviators determine their location and land safely. It wasn't glamorous work. There were no cheering crowds, but it was important. And more to the point, it was almost the only job a female aviator could get in 1935. So this one pilot, pilot that he talks about, one of the five, is Thaden, Louise Thaden. And I guess I should say who those five aviators are, right? They deserve their names to be shared. So on the inside jacket that explains about the book, it says, Keith O'Brien weaves together the stories of five remarkable women. Florence Klingensmith, a high school dropout who worked for a dry cleaner in Fargo, North Dakota. Ruth Elder, an Alabama housewife. Amelia Earhart, the most famous, but not necessarily the most skilled, which I hadn't known before. Ruth Nichols, who chafed at the constraints of her blue blood family's expectations. And Louise Thaden, the mother of two young kids who got her start selling coal in Wichita, Kansas. Together they fought for the chance to race against the men, and in 1936, one of them would triumph in the toughest race of all. Fly Girl celebrates a forgotten moment when tenacious, trailblazing women braved all obstacles to achieve greatness. Like I said, it's a really interesting read. It provides a lot of photos in the center that helps to bring things to life for me as well, to see the people that are being written about in the book. It also shares about Amelia Earhart's last flight, where she became missing over the Howland Islands in the Pacific, and everything leading up to that flight. Very well done. It really draws you in. But then most interesting to me as a writer was when I read the acknowledgments. Now, I don't know how many of you actually read the acknowledgments, but I typically do. I guess I'm a book geek and I like to read it completely, from beginning to end. But in his acknowledgments, he doesn't just list the names of people. He provides a lot of interesting background story with it as well. And he says here, in writing this book, I was faced with an obvious challenge. The primary characters were all dead, and almost everyone who knew them was dead too, because this was published in 2018. So obviously these people were in their 20s and 30s back in around 1930. So they were long gone. And almost everyone who knew them was dead too, or they were too young in the 1920s or 30s to have a detailed memory of important events in this narrative. In order to bring these characters back to life and reconstruct their world with details, dialogue, internal thoughts, feelings, and quotes, I had to rely almost exclusively on primary and secondary source material, including diaries and journals and memoirs and things of that nature, newspaper clippings. He goes on to say, I was able to find what I needed to tell this story only because these archivists in the libraries and countless others who are not named here found the information first, realized its historical significance, and then held on to it. They have more than my gratitude, they have my respect. So for all of us who, kind of hoard those papers and documents and newspaper clippings and things of that nature, scrapbooks, one day someone will appreciate that. So, that's helpful. And then he also ended with his appreciation for the relatives of some of the characters shared in the book. And he said, I'll just read this here. Last, I need to thank the relatives of some of the characters in this book, the handful of people I was fortunate enough to track down who had personal connections to the story. I am indebted to all of them, including Ruth Nichols' nephew, Norman Nichols, his son, Jeff Nichols, and the relative Richard Heckenblickner for their memories and their photographs of Aunt Ruth. Florence Klingensmith's great-nephew, Wayne Chapman, who sent me Florence's letters and other personal effects. Saved by family members for almost 85 years. How awesome is that? Cliff Henderson's stepdaughter, Kathy Scott, who found for me in storage, get this, Cliff's completed and never published memoir, a 268-page document that she never threw out, despite the fact that Cliff died more than 30 years ago. What a find. It's such a treasure. And Mary Lynn Beach Oliver, Walter and Olive Ann's daughter, who still lives in Wichita and welcomed me there. And finally, the entire Thaden family, especially Louise's daughter, youngest Patsy, now Patricia Thaden Webb, who was 82 years old and still going strong when I first met her at her home in Maryland in October 2016. Like a lot of the other family members of the long-ago aviators, Pat had documents, letters, photos, and even poems written by her mother that I couldn't have found anywhere else. But that's not why she was important to me. In Pat, tall and slender, warm and bright, I felt like I was sitting with Louise Thaden, or at least a piece of Louise, the only real piece left. In my long conversations with Pat over several meetings, I came to understand her mother, her motivations, fears, hopes, and dreams in ways I never could have by just reading old letters and news stories, and it seemed that Pat came to understand me too. In time, she began calling me Kid, a term of endearment. And so that underscores the importance that I also place in people's personal stories and their life stories. That's why it's such a privilege to me to be able to help people write their autobiographies, their memoirs, their life stories. And as a commissioned biographer, I know it's always been such an honor to sit with my clients and hear them reminisce. And so often they will share with me things that they don't even share with their closest family members. Just so many details and parts of history that could have been lost but were preserved because someone took the time to recognize the importance of their stories. And I encourage you to share your stories, to share your family's stories, to document them. Maybe you don't want to publish it for the world to see, but future generations will so value that you took the time and the effort to document your life experiences. So I said in the beginning that there were 3 books that I read, and the third is referring to the Bible. And if you've watched these episodes in the past, you know that I always try to tie in what I've been reading in regular books with what I've been reading in the Bible. And today, with the themes of fame and fear, it brought me to what I was reading today out of Acts, the book of Acts in the New Testament, and it's Acts chapter 10, verses 35 through 36. And let me just get there really quickly. It's saying, before I read that, let me just backtrack 1 second. In the book Fly Girls, the women were trying to be able to fly and have the permission, right, and the public support to fly just as equally as the men. And so one thing that we are assured of in the Bible comes from many places in the Bible, but what I read in Acts chapter 10, verse 35 through 6 is that, actually beginning in verse 34, God shows no partiality. God shows no partiality, but in every nation, whoever, man or woman, Jew or Gentile, in every nation, whoever fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him. The word which God sent to the children of Israel, preaching peace through Jesus Christ, he is Lord of all. And, he loves all of his people. And, it goes back to John 3:16, that promise. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And again in John 3:36, he who believes in the Son has everlasting life, and he who does not believe the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abides on him. So we have the choice to fear God and believe in him. But fearing God doesn't mean necessarily the same thing we tend to think of fear today. Fear is in fear of being harmed. It's not that. It's a fear of an honor and respect and consideration of God, putting him first, which also I wanted to share Psalm 45, verse 17. As the psalmist said, I will make your name to be remembered in all generations. God's name, not our name, not our fame. Make God famous. I will make your name to be remembered in all generations. Therefore, the people shall praise you forever and ever. So, as we continue through the day and into next week, I encourage you to, continue to read, but also read in the Bible, dig into his word, seek his truth, and let's make him famous. I wish all of you a wonderful rest of your day. Have a blessed week, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Take care.